Hi, welcome back. This is Lesson 10 from my book, Babette's Quick Start Guide to Theory for Fiddlers, Book 1. And this lesson is titled, In the Background. Now, why do you think I have a title called In the Background? Well, it's because if you go to a jam session and everyone's playing, and you want to play, you just don't want to sit there, you need to have some kind of idea of what you could do in the background that won't take away from what the other players are playing. And so all this that we've been learning about chords is where this comes in. This is going to be most helpful for you. Because remember that in most of the music you play, the first chord and the fifth chord are the most often used chords in that key. Because of that, most of the time if you want to play in the background, you can play either the first note or the fifth note in a scale and be okay. The note you want to play most often, however, is the fifth note. Now, why is that? Well, that is because the fifth note of the one chord in a key is the same as the first note of the five chord in a key. Let's look at some examples. Let's take a look at the key of G. The fifth note of the one chord is D. The first note of the five chord is D. You can see here that the same D note appears in both chords. Therefore, you'll want to play the D most often and then go ahead and play the G. In the key of D, the fifth note of the one chord is A. The first note of the five chord is A. The same A note appears in both chords. Therefore, play A most often and then play D. And finally, in the key of A, the fifth note of the one chord is E. The first note of the five chord is E. The same E note appears in both chords. Therefore, play E most often and then play A. Now, as you're playing in this jam session in the background, listen carefully to the melody and to the chord changes that are being played. And with practice, you'll be able to change your notes to fit in with those chord changes perfectly. And when you can hear the chord changes, then you can start playing the two notes of the chords that we practiced earlier, instead of just the fifth note that you're playing. And you can also play the two notes of the one chord when you can hear that it is the one chord that's being played. Now let's take a look at the questions and answers on our worksheet on In the Background. Question 1. Most of the time, when playing in the background, the note you want to play most often in a key is which note? And that is the fifth note. Question 2. In the following keys, which note appears in both the one chord and the five chord? Well, in the key of G, that note is D. In the key of D, that note is A. And in the key of A, that note is E. Question 3. In the following keys, which note do you want to play most often? In the key of G, that note is D. In the key of D, that note is A. And in the key of A, that note is E. Question 4. In the following keys, which note should be the second most often note you play? In the key of G, that note is G. In the key of D, that note is D. And in the key of A, that note is A. Now let's look at the review questions. Question 1. Play each pair of open strings together. What is the name of the chord you are playing? Please pause this video and go get your violin and make sure it's in tune. Okay. Question 1 is play each pair of open strings together. What is the name of the chord you are playing? So first we're going to start by playing the D and the A together. Now what chord is that? Well, that is the D chord. Now let's play the G and D together. And that would be the G chord. And now we'll play the A and E together. And that is your A chord. Question 2. In the key of G, give the name of the most often used chord. The most often used chord in the key of G is G. The second most often used chord in the key of G is D. Question 3. In the key of D, give the name of the most often used chord. And in D, the most often used chord is D. The second most often used chord in the key of D is A. And finally, question 4. In the key of A, give the name of the most often used chord. Well, in the key of A, that chord is A. And the second most often used chord in the key of A is E.